Greetings to everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this important webinar about FGM, female genital mutilation. We have speakers who have been advocating on FGM, and we realize that it is continuing and it is increasing in some parts of the world. FGM is absolutely an expression of violence against women. Several years ago, the Special Rapporteur on Torture was courageous enough to make a statement of FGM as torture. So today, we're going to have several presentations and then have questions and answers. I am Lois A. Herman, the Managing Director of WONRUN, the Women's UN Report Network. And our first speaker will be Dr. Toby Levine von Gleichen. She is an associate at the Hutchinson Harvard University Center. She is CEO of Uncut Voices and past president, I guess, of Forward for FGM in Europe. And all of us have worked on FGM for years. We've seen how some young women and some not so young die from the process of FGM, but it is essentially a mutilation, a violation of women and girls' rights. And it's more in some of the remote villages of the world. Efforts have been made to eradicate it, and we just had in February the official day against FGM. So Toby Levine von Gleichen has been really a pace setter in this initiative for advocacy against FGM. Toby.
Thank you, Lois. I am going to try to share my screen for my presentation. I think it is working one way or the other. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and this should go like that. Good. So I'm Toby Levin von Gleichen, and I'm very happy to be sharing my report with you. It's perhaps counterintuitive to consider reconstructive surgery as an innovative approach to ending FGM, but I do, and many others do too, and so I'm going to try to make the case. First, the situation. In 2024, the NHS didn't yet cover restorative genital surgery, and in 2025, it still doesn't for FGM survivors. And given that the service is available elsewhere, I ask, is this a regrettable omission and is it discriminatory? It would seem so because the necessary expertise exists in the UK, because to alleviate vulvar pain and discomfort occasioned by causes other than FGM, the NHS makes similar plastic surgeries available, and because vestiges of prudery from earlier eras impede open discussion of women's genitalia. As Alice Walker's mother advised her daughters concerning intimate hygiene, first wash down as far as possible, then up as far as possible, then wash possible. And yes, a door to possible indeed opening with ACERS, advocating access to clitoral reconstruction surgery and emotional support for FGM survivors within a research framework. Inspired by the fact that those who can pay out-of-pocket benefit in the UK from deinfibulation, clitoral, and labial restoration, the failure of national health insurance to cover costs exposes many women to inadequate health care where they reside. A first step, however, toward reversing this lack has been taken. Acknowledgement of the need to offer reconstruction as an extension of WHO guidelines for specialized services. Thus, the ACERS project, co-founded by Professor Sohair El-Nil and Juliet Albert, advocates for clitoral reconstruction and emotional support for FGM survivors in the UK. Juliet, a specialist midwife, is also associated with the Acton African Well Woman Clinic, which she opened in 2017 to provide community-based care for FGM survivors. The ACERS project aims to address the lack of FGM reconstruction services in the UK, a gap that the NHS currently does not fill, despite offering similar surgeries for other conditions. So to address this need, ACERS launched a parliamentary petition on March 8, 2024, in partnership with Janet File, MBE, who is the FGM policy advisor for the Royal College of Midwives, and with the support of numerous FGM charities, including the Vavengers, Forward UK, Integrate UK, Manor Gardens, the Iranian and Kurdish Women's Rights Organization, Midday Somali Development Network, Sister Circle, and others. Sadly, the petition that aims to ensure more equitable treatment halted signature gathering temporarily, but I believe it intends to pick up again. So to reiterate, the ACERS UK project is petitioning Parliament with support from FGM experts, survivors, charity workers, and healthcare professionals. Reconstruction surgery, available in Germany, France, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, and Spain, often integrated with psychosexual therapy, as well as in Egypt, Burkina Faso, Kenya, and the USA, remains, however, conspicuously absent in the UK. Despite providing gender reassignment surgery, labiaplasty, and post-cancer vulva reconstruction, the NHS does not afford FGM survivors the same level of patient choice. It is imperative that we address this glaring health disparity promptly. Ensuring the availability of optimal treatment options for FGM survivors should be an integral aspect of the End FGM campaign. Agreed and acted upon by the UK FGM Restore project toward a national center of expertise. Shamsa Arawilo, an FGM survivor, is actively advocating for the NHS to provide clitoral reconstruction surgery. Alongside her, the UK Restore project team are working to convince policymakers to establish a national center for the surgery, integrating it with psychological support. They argue that the necessary surgical skills exist within the NHS, and the lack of provision constitutes a health inequality for FGM survivors. So despite setback in gathering support for the parliamentary petition, a learning curve is visible. And indeed, the BBC has broadcast a documentary featuring Dr. Foldes, that is the surgeon who restores the clitoris, who at 6 minutes and 39 seconds performs the restorative surgery for a television audience. I admit I haven't seen it. I haven't seen this version of it. Regarding Dr. Foldes' clinic, Brexit interfered with an earlier effort to facilitate UK residents' access to it. And here's a bit of history. Already in 2013, FWA Dorkanu requested assistance for a Ghanaian mentee whom FWA judged at risk of mental upset should she not receive treatment for clitoral reconstruction. That mental upset is a bit of a euphemism. It was a lot worse than that. She told FOA of her despair and longing for normality. Can you help her? FOA asked me. Coincidentally, a male friend who had read the Foldes biography, Undoing FGM, which I translated from French to English, was moved to donate $500 to any woman who wanted her clitoris restored. This spontaneous gesture of support inspired me to share an idea with friends and led to launching the short-lived Clitoris Restoration Fund. After FOA put me in touch with Pierrette, that's a pseudonym for the young woman, I introduced her virtually to Dr. Pierre Foldes. Additional modest contributions sufficed to cover the flight from London to Paris, while Diana Martin's generous offer of hospitality for the patient's recovery made our first and only sponsored clitoral reconstruction possible. Fortunately, Diana's house is in the village next to Pierre's clinic. All the while, during the several months spent exchanging emails and discussing details of the coming operation, Pierrette sent me an apology. Yes, I knew she had been frightened. The idea of knives once again approaching a wounded and sensitive body part understandably upset her. She still longed to feel normal, however, to regain what had been violently snatched, and to bolster the confidence to explore erotic options with new boyfriends. Around men, insecurity about her body intimidated her, impeding a satisfying social life. But good fortune had smiled on her. She found a boyfriend who loved her as she was. Surgery appeared no longer needed. Yet the funds were available, the date set, and the clinic informed. What should we do? A Gambian friend in Norway, active for decades against FGM, phoned me, coincidentally, about an hour after Pierrette had decommissioned. Then I said, "You've wanted restoration, haven't you?" She accepted the opportunity with alacrity, and on 5 September 2014, Dr. Foldes, when asked what kind of clitoris she wanted, fashioned a plump and lively organ. Nena's first narrative and an eyewitness report by author Jeannie Kortum have been submitted for publication to Uncut Voices Press. And Nena's new evergreen anatomy continues providing pleasure. Indeed, most, if not all, operations succeed, though nuanced findings appear in recent research. In a qualitative interview study from Sweden, we learned that the results, based on self-categorization and labeling theory, demonstrated both benefits and disappointments following the surgery. Several women reported positive outcomes in terms of sexual, psychosocial, and aesthetics. They experienced reduced genital pain, improved sex lives, and a sense of feeling more empowered and at ease in their bodies. Yet some women reported aesthetic, functional, and process-related disappointment. Nonetheless, most expressed gratitude for the revived appendages and, in conclusion, reported physical, emotional, and psychosocial benefits of the surgery. Thus, although not without risks, reconstructive surgery appeals to many sufferers who tell us why. FGM reconstructive surgery made me complete. I feel a complete person at last after my operation. I want to say to the people who do this to us, it can ruin your life, your happiness. I still wake up screaming with the same nightmare in a bathtub filled with blood. In France, the Institut Génésique in Saint-Germain-en-Laye, which became Women Safe and Children in 2017, provides a model holistic approach. They host speak-outs where patients express satisfaction or ambivalence, but rarely unalloyed negativity. The institution's history. On 7 March 2014, Dr. Pierre Foldes, Frédéric Martz, Linda Vade-Curiel, and colleagues celebrated the opening of the Interdisciplinary Holistic Institute, addressing violence against women, including FGM, that links those seeking clitoral restoration with clinicians who perform it. To overcome inefficiency by bundling various specialties, the Institute welcomes distressed women and gratis, interviews them, and determines how best to help. Involved are paid and volunteer staff, and I didn't mean to go that far, staff, surgeons, lawyers, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, thus bundling so many services at a single address and alleviating what could otherwise be a nightmarish journey through unfamiliar bureaucratic channels. And there we are at a Speak Out. In 2019, increased focus on children and adolescents enhanced the mandate, and in 2020, branch offices opened elsewhere. Yet reception of restorative surgery has not been free of controversy, as we have already seen. Regarding successes claimed in peer review articles, journalist Linda Presley reports skepticism. Although there was no control group, on the face of it, it sounded positive. But in a follow-up letter to The Lancet, a heavyweight British team, consultants in gynecology, obstetrics, and psychology, took issue with a piece that Foldes had published. The claims are not anatomically possible, they wrote. Where the body of the clitoris has been removed, the neurovascular bundle cannot be preserved. There is therefore no reality to the claim that surgery can excavate and expose buried tissue. The campaign against FGM could be undermined by a false proposition that the ill effects can be reversed. The response? It's a matter of knowing what you're about. A student of Foldes in Spain, also a doctor, has reported. I've never seen any mutilated woman without remaining clitoris. Whenever we operate, and the screen for me is a little bit cut off by everybody's photograph on the right-hand side. Whenever we find a woman needing an operation for cancer, for instance, on the clitoris, it's not an easy thing to remove the entire organ. Normally, the patients, at least those who survive, will always have remaining clitoris, so they can always benefit from replacing it in the right place. And so how, of course, is this to be understood? Pierre addressed this concern at a talk he gave in Dublin. For some time, criticism has focused on a hypothesized negative impact on ending FGM, if one unintended consequence of repair might be continuation. If you can restore it, those who practice it might think, why not carry it out with all its associated financial and festive context? More convincing arguments, however, target the operation's increasing complexity, elevating the expertise and experience required of clinicians, the unceasing evolution of techniques, and the distinction brought by each individual patient to the operating theater. No two mutilations are alike. And Pierre warns mistakes are inadmissible given the danger to be avoided at all costs of doubly victimizing those already overly familiar with the blade. So how is it done? A technical answer to skeptics might go like this. Excision has two consequences. Amputating the clitoris causes bleeding and an infection that will displace the stump, pushing it up into an abnormal position by 2 or 3 centimeters, and burying it under the scar, thereby preventing sexual pleasure, as the visible part of the organ has disappeared. But excision rarely slices very deep. Girls have a cushion of fat at the site, and they fight back. The idea that occurs to Pierre while examining Madame Issatou, that's in Burkina Faso, Madame Issatou's mutilated vulva is quite simple. Remove the scar to reveal the healthy tissue beneath it. He would simply incise around the injured zone to find a retracted organ stuck to the bone and pry it loose. A really modest operation. It lasted half an hour under local anesthesia. And the clitoris is, in fact, quite a long organ. Although the visible portion is from 2 millimeters to 1 centimeter, internally it stretches up to 12 centimeters. Now, despite the scar's removal also erasing the patient's pain, powerful male nurses disapproved. As Pierre tells the story, his first patient, Madame Issatou, found herself after removal of the clitoral scar, not only free of pain, but newly blessed with pleasure. She would return to thank Pierre for enhancing contact with her husband. Good news to our ears, but a fact that displeased the male head nurse on the ward, who warned Pierre, the part you took care of, better not touch it again. And at first, Pierre heeded the warning. Only later did cognitive dissonance challenge him. How absurd he thought to be relieving pain that would best be avoided in the first place. He became an activist by reversing, in his words, the effect of a crime. After all, back to the early days, at the heart of the curative relationship is relieving pain. And it was this, not the patient's desire for sexual fulfillment, that moved Foldes to perfect the intervention. He had, in fact, almost by accident, assuaged the distress of Madame Issatou in 1987 in Burkina Faso. That success encouraged further efforts. Although the UK is behind in this experience, particularly in France and Germany, successes motivate research. And I list genital repairers on the rest of this slide. Having discovered the simple first step, removing the scar, Pierre wondered why no one else had begun repairing sooner. What he discovered shocked him. After all, easily found were innumerable treatises about the structure and treatment of the penis. The clitoris, however, had been erased. Its absence from medical textbooks was striking. To my mind, Foldes told Hubert Plongeot that blindness represents Western clitoridectomy. The clitoris doesn't exist. It has been voluntarily excised from our culture, even in those circles that should be most naturally interested in it. The indifference, if not hostility, of the guild soon revealed itself. Take female gynecologists and sexologists. How can they avoid interest in the clitoris? Yet the focus clearly lay not on the sexuality of women, but on women as mothers. An emphasis placed on procreation, duty, not pleasure. The literature ignores the clitoris to privilege the vagina. Even female gynecologists admitted the clitoris isn't a measure of our mandate. Pierre attended 23 sexology conferences before even one targeted female sexuality. The situation is truly bizarre, he told novelist Hubert Prolonge. If you weren't concerned about women, why would you become a gynecologist? But it appears the clitoris is the main problem. There's some sort of mental block. People simply can't bring themselves to talk about the clitoris, or if they do, they blush. It has been banished. I've been increasingly convinced, he concludes, that the roads have been paved by, by bad intention to gain a certain power over women. Indeed, even the Egyptian Minister of Health, in a phone call, remarked to Pierre, why all the bother? Why bother with all that female stuff? The situation has, however, improved. And well-known gynecological surgeons are using Pierre's technique, demonstrating it, filming it, studying it, and performing it. And the top professors in the profession are now wholly behind his work. But financing, Pierre was known to French politicians as a friend of Bernard Kouchner, former foreign minister of France, and with Pierre, a co-founder of Doctors of the World. Goodwill was mine to secure government funding. For in economic terms, the cost-benefit analysis falls clearly on the side of restorative intervention. For this reason, in part, French, German, Dutch, Italian, Scandinavian, and Spanish health insurance kicks in. I'm going to go quickly over this slide because it shows you many of the people I've been talking about. The last not least of them, I want to introduce Dr. Dan O'Day, who applies his skill in plastic surgery to restore the entire vulva. And there is the textbook that he's written on this subject. I've seen it done and I've seen the results, and the vulva really does look as close as possible to the way it did before it was mutilated. How did I learn this? By addressing medical professionals in multiple venues with Dan O'Day, who had been at the University of Aachen and is now in Heidelberg. This is an instance of our appearing together to address healthcare professionals. So for the UK, paradigms exist. Then moving on to my conclusion. In Dr. Pierre Foldes' Stories of Restoring, I describe a holistic model for UK emulation, decisively not enshrined as culture. FGM means to Foldes torture and crime. These words were Waris Diries used to evoke what happened to her when a 5-year-old in Somalia, she was forced under the blade. Her memoir narrates a visit to Dr. Foldes, whom she consulted whom she consulted nearly 3 decades ago in the early years of perfecting his technique to discuss restoration. In his office, he showed her a video of the procedure that sadly caused flashbacks. This clued the good surgeon into the need for pre- and post-operative counseling, in addition to the surgery itself, with monitored healing. In short, all-around care. On 11 September 2013, a similar option became available in Germany. The Waldfriede Hospital in Berlin-Zehlendorf, also known as the Desert Flower Center, scheduled its first 2 patients for reconstruction the day after opening. Dr. Foldes operated. His method, hinting at psychoanalysis, Dr. Foldes reminds us that reconstructive surgery is born of sympathetic listening. And at that point, I'll conclude.
Thank you
There's a
so
lot more
much.
stuff, as you can see, but it's all available for you to look at your leisure.
This was an outstanding overview of the Reconstruction process. We know that we live in a patriarchal world. All we have to do is look in all continents and see the lashback that's coming even more so today. I would also like to mention that migration, immigration, and displacement doesn't end FGM. And we're coming up on our spring and summer season and school vacations in many ways. And there are ways in which girls are subject of FGM that may not be publicly known, such as flying them back to family in Africa when they think they're going on vacation, but instead the FGM process takes place. Another is by people coming together to fly a cutter, an exciser, such as to UK, and she will perform often of immigrant families. So there's just many dimensions. We need to look at root causes, and yet we are constantly struggling to get back to the human rights dimension for women and girls. I'd also like to recognize Emma Bonino of Italy, who has been really a catalyst and in her commitment against FGM. And she was the mind against a resolution passed several years ago by the UN against FGM. But still, we are back together year after year, struggling on this issue, making some progress, seeing restoration, but we've got to get to the grassroots. So thank you, Toby. And
Very welcome.
Hillary, who would like to present next? Hillary? Hillary, are you?
Unmute yourself, Hillary.
Here we are. Hillary's in UK and
right. Success.
has looked at many dimensions of FGM. So tell us your insights.
Okay. Do you want me to go ahead? Lovely. Thank you. Yeah, I've actually written a blog post for this talk. I'm not going to give PowerPoint presentations or anything. Sarah has the details of that and we'll let us share that when, oh, there it is. Right. Okay. So that is where it is. And anybody who'd like to is very welcome to read that, which I finished writing about an hour ago. It being, it's very difficult at the moment to write about this stuff because there are so many rules in various countries about what you can say and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I've written that and I'm just going to talk to you now about how I see the field. And you may find what I'm going to say a bit controversial because unlike the presentation which Toby did, which was very much focused on the specifics of FGM, I'm going to ask why we don't look about the non-specifics of FGM, the things that make it actually permissible by not stopping certain things. I'm a sociologist, so necessarily I suppose I would say that I'm a sociologist with a big interest in the environment and and economics and politics. And my feeling is that we have to ask very awkward social questions as well as addressing the realities of what FGM is. I've written several books and chapters on the specifics, so please don't think, anybody that listening to me now, that I haven't addressed the realities, the real cutting, the real pain, the real trauma of what happens to people. But in a way, I see it as my job now, having studied this for a very long time, to ask more complicated questions, because I don't think we're getting the results that we all desperately want. And I can't tell you why that is happening specifically, but I can invite you to think about ways that maybe we can move on to thinking about those things and asking the really awkward questions of the people who ought to be supporting us and are not doing so. So that's where I'm going to start from. and I've been addressing let me just pop this where I can see it. Economic and human capital losses arising from FGM. I've been writing about that for a long time. I've been looking at climate change, socioeconomic and conflict displacement, issues around water, which may surprise some people, but I hope to persuade you that it's important. And the absolute disaster of child stunting. I cannot understand why we don't always ask, are children being stunted by this? There is probably nothing as disastrous for a society. We can look at all kinds of conflicts going on now to know this. As child stunting, children who are stunted don't become healthy. They have lower cognitive ability than they should have. They're not able to operate as adults as you would wish. They can't operate as parents as you would wish. And yet, I can't see how it is possible that FGM doesn't affect and negatively influence that particular phenomenon. So my question is, how can we get the attention of leaders and decision makers to focus on these big issues, to make them understand that it's not just about being nice and kind to ladies. It's about actually maintaining the health of our economies and our societies. That is where I'm standing at the moment. And my first bit of that is to say, we have to segment our messaging. And let me again say immediately, I don't mean we don't need the books that tell the stories from Maurice Deary and many other very valuable, amazing people. I don't mean a bit that we shouldn't be having people in communities that go and say, this happened to me. Hoda might be a very good example, our friend Hoda. Don't do it to anybody else because it is a disaster. We need these people. We need them desperately. We need the global media campaign, which goes with caravans through various parts of Africa, telling people, stop, just stop. Those are all vital, but they don't cement the decision to stop in a way that makes it impossible to go back. They can't because they don't have the leverage to do that. It takes vast amounts of money, it takes vast amounts of power to actually change legislation and education and health services such that you can't go back. And that is what we're missing in my genuinely humble view. And I'm very happy to be challenged on that by anybody who wants to. So we need all the things we've got already. And we do need to be saying that theoretically you're going to end up with no FGM in 2030, which I don't believe is possible, by the way. We need to be saying that. We need to be talking about gendered violence and saying the end, no more, please. But we know we can't do it on our own. And the people we most need to bring into the equation to stop it are the people who've got their hands over their ears, don't want to know, and we're not challenging them. To challenge them, we need to segment our message. If you're selling anything from ice cream to cars, if you're trying to persuade people to vote for you, not somebody else, you segment your message. You take it to the people who need persuasion of particular aspects of whatever your message is. We don't do that. We're still on the touchy-feely, this is awful, we have to stop it. And it is awful, and we do have to stop it. But that itself will not actually bring about, in the end, the total change that we demand. To get that, we have to get beyond the people who will already agree with us and say to other people, this is just indefensible. You have to stop it yourselves. So I've tried to look at things that might help us to segment that message in a way that makes sense to people who have currently got their fingers in their ears. And to do that, I have looked, as I say, at turning over climate change and how climate change is often dismissed by those who have the most power to do something about it. They say, oh, it's a story, or we're going to pass the buck, or it's not our fault, or they maybe accuse you of making it up. We know that's not the case, but we do know that, in fact, things like climate change hit women and children even harder than they hit other people. I don't mean there are no men who suffer, of course there are, but women and children are the most vulnerable and the least powerful, and not enough is being done about that. And I've got a quote here from a young climate activist from Uganda who was at COP28, I think it was COP28, which is the conference of the parties about climate change. And she says, if the people who are most affected by the climate crisis are not able to have a proper voice in the COP negotiations, how can the process be truly inclusive? We're proud that the youth movement in many countries is led by young women, but that has not yet translated into change at the level of COP. Climate impacts make existing gender inequalities worse, so a fair representation of women at the negotiation table is the bare minimum. Nothing about us should be decided without us. But at the same time, we know that only 2% of delegations had equal numbers of men and women last time around. 34% is the same percentage as 10 years ago of men to women. And of the world leaders attending COP, only 15 out of 133 were women. These things matter for FGM too, because one of the things that happens with climate change is that women become more vulnerable to things like FGM. We can't divorce these things and treat them as separate. They are all part of the same thing. To say it again, nothing about us should be decided without us. And gender violence is part of what comes with climate change. So if we look then at something quite similar, which is socioeconomic and conflict displacement, we see this again. Climate change doesn't always produce displacement, but quite often it does, because, for instance, women who are minimalist farmers living in subsistence agrarian societies may find that they have to move because their land no longer produces what they want. There are a lot of other things, that displacement through military assault and conflict of various sorts. And the result of that is that sometimes more women have their daughters cut than before, because they see that as a way of protecting, believe it or not, protecting their daughters from rape, which it doesn't, and it makes it even more serious and awful, or making them more available to be sold as brides and things like this. So again, we have an extraordinary situation, and I will read you this section from something called Building Bridges to End FGM, in which the writer says, in times of economic hardship or natural disaster, for example, parents or caregivers may be driven to subject their daughters to FGM in communities where this enhances a girl's chance of being married. Marrying a daughter in times of crisis is a way for families to gain financial relief through bride price and to ensure that girls are protected and provided for in wedlock, because wedlock is the only way they will be protected at all. FGM may be practiced even by families who are aware of short, medium and long-term harm because of the perceived immediate benefits. It takes place to save the family honour, particularly if a girl was the victim of rape during armed conflict. When a community is faced with insecurity, efforts to maintain or restore peace generally take up most of the attentions of the authorities in a community. The rule of law will not be as strongly implemented as in times of peace. This is important, obviously. Consequently, a lack of legal protection puts women and girls at further risk of undergoing FGM without consequences for the perpetrators. Finally, traditional cutters may also experience instability and hardship during crisis situations, which can fuel their actual motivation to continue and even increase the practice to generate income. We need to find ways to discuss FGM with communities while at the same time addressing their key priorities in times of crisis. When we're talking about that, what happens when schools close and girls don't have anywhere to go to school anymore, when the age at which FGM may be changed to much earlier because the parents know they're going to go to a community where FGM will not be permitted, but they still want their daughters to have it before they go, so they do it as infants. And of course, when girls who've had FGM are raped, as happens often in military conflict, and quite often kills them. These are not things that are about just not being nice to ladies. These are things that are vital to the actual existence of real communities in real time, but not many people are talking about them. I'm going to take you now to, and all these things, I give you more examples in the paper. Water. How many people know that even in stable times, 200 million hours of lives every day is spent collecting water, often not of particularly good quality? Climate change is one of those critical aspects with water, but water is also a vital and independent factor in shaping the routine reality of social and family interaction in many parts of the world. Now, interestingly, just 2 days away from the date of last year, which was World Water Day 2024, 22nd of March, the theme of that year was leveraging water for peace. And we posted a weblog on my blog again, which I give a link to, on World Water Day and why it matters for FGM. And the question asked was, does the availability of water mitigate? Does it mitigate the need for FGM? And I found this passage, which I think is extraordinary. In June 2014, Relief Web published an intriguing news report entitled Improved Access to Water May Hold the Solution to Ending FGM in Africa, so a decade ago. The new item concerned a discovery made by Gwada Okot Tau, a, quote, female genital mutilation traditional surgeon, who was commissioned by a local consortium, the Citizens Coalition for Electoral Democracy in Uganda, to find answers to governance questions amongst communities that circumcise and those that don't. The point there being, by the way, that in some communities it is believed that if women are not circumcised, they have no adult status and cannot have any part in governance. Gwada, the person who was commissioned, conducted research among 20 ethnic groups across Africa, including Kenya, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Uganda, Ghana, and South Africa. He says the ethnic communities that practice FGM in Africa can be found in areas where the water supply is problematic. He found that in Kenya, for example, only 3 of the East African nation's 63 ethnic groups did not practice any form of circumcision. And these 3 communities were found in the Rift Valley region, where there was water bodies like lakes and rivers. He believes that FGM has become a prevalent cultural practice as a consequence of lack of water. And you can imagine the various reasons that might be said to be so, from hygiene to just ease of access and all sorts of other things. I can't find any current work that follows that through. I have searched. It may be that I've failed and other people are going to send me emails tomorrow morning saying, aha, you just didn't read this or that or the other, but I can't find anything. And the significant bit of that is not that I'm a terrible researcher, it's that if I can't, a lot of other people won't be able to find it either. Where is the correlation? Why is that not of interest? I've contacted water specialists. There is a specialism in the location of aquifers based in one of the universities in Britain. Very nice guy who helped me to think about this. And he said, yes, they can find aquifers and they can do this and that and the other, and they can release water. And I said, well, have you done anything about FGM? He said, no. Why would we? He works in Kenya. I find this extraordinary. I'm not criticising him at all. Why would he know if nobody has asked him? Because it's not his field. He's a geographer, not an anthropologist or a medic. But why aren't we asking? How can we have failed to ask something as essential as, does water avoid the necessity for FGM? Now, that is the sort of question any sensible man could easily ask in a power position without kind of involving himself in the more delicate aspects of FGM at any point. Why haven't they done it? And then stunting. I think that children born to generations of cut mothers who are themselves already obviously harmed must run a higher risk of stunting than those born to uncut mothers. The World Health Organization offers these facts. Globally, in 2022, 149 million children under 5 were estimated to be stunted, that is too short for age, and 45 million were estimated to be wasted, that is too thin for height. Nearly half of deaths amongst children under 5 years of age were linked to undernutrition. These mostly occur in low and middle income family countries. The developmental, economic, social, and medical impacts of the global burden of malnutrition are serious and lasting for individuals and their families, for communities, and for countries. And I would like to think I'm wrong about this, but I cannot see how that is totally disconnected from the issue of FGM. Again, has anybody asked? Search me. I've not been able to find anywhere that has been asked. And I've asked people who said to me, that's a good question. People who know what they're talking about. Why aren't we pressing this? Why aren't we saying, yes, it's very nice to know stories about women who've had FGM and have managed to tell a lot of other people not to do it and have been hugely successful in that, and they're very brave. But why aren't we asking about things like water, about stunting, these things that are really serious global issues? Why aren't we connecting them with something that actually we know there are 230 million women and girls in the world at the moment who have had FGM, 230 million. It is not a peripheral issue. So, as I tried to say, I hope I'm wrong about all this, and I hope that the reason there are no inquiries is because it wouldn't make any difference, but I suspect it would make quite a lot of difference. In all fields of inquiry and knowledge, FGM studies, which doesn't really exist yet, but which I and others, colleagues in this panel, for instance, think should exist very much so. Knowledge changes, questions and inquiries change over time. We know that we have to keep asking and we have to keep finding different answers. And we know that there is change in the way that the answers will appear and all the rest of it. We know that patriarchy and violence against women is a really critical global issue, and FGM is at the top of the hierarchy of those sorts of violence and patriarchal harm. But we still mostly focus on the ground. I want to make it clear, absolutely, that the courageous community-facing work of FGM survivors and their supporters, local leaders, political spokespersons, NGO activists, and others, men and women alike, is and always will be vital. I have no doubt that they are critical issues. But those aren't we're not winning just asking the questions of those people. We have all kinds of things that are missing from that we haven't yet asked. And I think that it's the sort of questions that I'm trying to raise here. Or other questions, other people know much cleverer than me, they might come with much better questions. I'm fine with that. But why aren't we even asking what the questions should be? And I think the likelihood that we're going to reach 2030 and have eradicated FGM is, to be honest, zero, right? UNICEF says much the same thing. In 2023 and in 2025, they said these things. The world will miss the target of ending FGM by 2030 without urgent action, including from men and boys. And then they added, recognizing that legal reforms and policies are not enough, we need to ensure flexible, sustainable funding for grassroots organizations leading change within communities. We need schools to be safe places where girls are educated about their rights. We need boys and men to be allies, standing and fighting alongside women and girls to promote traditions and cultural practices which empower women and girls and dismantle discriminatory norms. The progress we've made is undeniable, but so is the urgency. We are just 5 years away from 2030, the global deadline to end FGM. Every day that passes means more girls are at risk. For every girl who escapes, millions more still face the blade. We stand firm in our commitment, says UNICEF. This harmful practice must end in our lifetime, and it will if we step up together. Well, I agree with them, but step up together doesn't just mean the likes of you and me and other people who are talking about that now. It means getting hold of the people who haven't given it a moment's thought as yet and telling them that we will not tolerate anymore their negligence of critical issues, really globally critical issues. We need to support the men who are already doing everything they can. And there are many, and we all know many of them, and they're brilliant people. But we need to support them too, to ask of other, much less caring men, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you looking at these issues? What is it about it that makes it so difficult for you to understand that even if you only care about the bottom line of your own company or nation or whatever, economically and in other ways, it is essential that you ask these questions and you locate, whether I personally located the right ones or I haven't, it is essential that we locate these things that are impediments to actually erasing these terrible crimes, because that's what they are. They are crimes, and we've got to call them that. So we have a challenge on, and I think the only way to address it is to say, yes, there is nothing wrong with the things we are doing already. They're essential. We have to carry on doing them. Preferably, we have to find even better ways of delivering our messages and questions. But there's another half of the equation which we haven't even begun to look at. And that is the half that affects those people with the most power and the most influence, who could actually, if they got on with it, stop this forever. End of message. So, no comment.
I commented you in the chat for raising the extremely important issue of segmenting appeals to various audiences on the advertising model. And what I wanted to add, but just didn't have time or space, when Joy Keshi Walker first launched the Nigerian painting project, her home was advertising. And she said, well, if if advertising can sell toothpaste to people without toothbrushes, then, lots of other things should be possible. And then she found that advertising its basis is tailoring the message. So, and I think that deserves a lot more thought in those things.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a marketeer. I'm not a person that is an expert in marketing, but I watch a lot of politics, particularly. And I watch a lot of things like at COP, where they're trying to persuade us all that we actually love coal and all the rest of it. I can see that happening. And there are very powerful, influential, wealthy people doing that. And I think, why aren't they using a bit of their energy to do something useful instead?
Yes, that's right.
So we shall have to see. But I mean, just asking the question is probably a start.
Yeah, but your discovery that where water is plentiful, FGM is less likely is also something that needs to be pursued, as you said.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, I really did spend a lot of time trying to chase through, well, who did it next, who looked at this, who did, and it may well be that I've failed in some way, or maybe because it was so early, it wasn't recorded on the internet, or but why hasn't it been picked up? Why, when we've got people who are doing aquifers, do they actually genuinely not know about this issue? Because it's not that they don't want to help, they're good people, but they just, it's never occurred to them.
Yeah.
So
I think there is one of the points that I was making about the hesitance to talk about genitalia, and above all, even more so women's genitalia. I think that's it's closing our mouths to a certain extent. That it makes things more embarrassing.
well, a lot of men don't want to talk about those things, and I understand that. And most of us took several years to get used to talking about those sorts of things ourselves. And so I've been searching, and I've written quite a lot now about how men can help without having to go into gory detail, because they're not surgeons and they don't want to do that. And why should they? Because a great deal of medical care is social medicine, where I'm not a clinician, but I am a social medic. I understand about public health, and I don't have to be a clinician in order to understand public health.
No.
What I have to understand is what you can do to improve things on a social and economic scale. And that's what we're talking about really here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lois, you should unmute
Here we
yourself.
go. I want to tell you, there was an attempt to hack this webinar. I was warned by Windows Security and also Avast. So we're living in still very complicated times when it comes to women's and girls' issues. I'm not sure when I was knocked off whether you mentioned medicalization. Maybe you will just say a few words on that.
Medicalization. Yeah, well, I mentioned it only in the sense that there may be people who have greater incentive to do it because there is no other source of income. And some of those will be clinical and they'll say, oh, it's safer and I can do it with anesthetic and all this sort of stuff. And others will just say, well, I'm available and I'll do it. I'm taking the view more and more that we have to treat the ones who are medical just like the ones who are witchcraft or traditional midwives. We have to say they're all, just as we have to say that every person that's had FGM has been submitted to a crime. They are a victim as well as a survivor, and they are survivors and they're very brave people, but they are also victims. And if we avoid the word victim, we are avoiding the fact that this is a crime. In the same way, whether they're clinical or they're traditional midwives or they're just opportunists, they are all criminals.
So very well said. Thank you. And to all of you who have indeed been activists against FGM for years, and it's a continuing struggle. I remember your presentation, Hillary, at the FGM conference in Geneva that BC, but I organized, and it was so moving. You know, I still remember it well. People need to hear those stories. And young girls can be deceived. It could be grandma who says, you must cut this girl child, because otherwise she will not be eligible. And this girl may be told she's going to a birthday party, and someone will take her to a hut, and the door will be closed, and the trauma begins. Furthermore, there are in Africa women cutters, who have a political power. And they are able to maintain some of the blocks we have in eradicating FGM, because for them, as Hillary and Toby mentioned, it's a way to make money. So, Hillary, your economic analysis is pivotal. And Lorraine? Lorraine, do you have comments? I see Camille Amadi has also raised his hand. That was really an enlightening awareness for me when I saw his work in Iran. And people don't assume that this will happen in other countries beyond Africa and maybe Southeast Asia, but indeed it does.
Okay.
Hello.
Shall I start?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending upon your location. Thank you very much, and I'm pleased and I'm honored to be here. And it's very nice to see in the chat the number of men who are also participating. 2024 and 2025 has marked a year of unprecedented global political change. A staggering 4 billion people have been part of the electoral process. There has been a conversion of right-wing groups, nationalist groups, authoritarian leaders, religious groups, and conservative groups. And this shift has led toward more conservative governments. It has produced insecurity, an overt anti-immigration climate, and a curtailing of funding for foreign aid and gender development. And these shifts have had a profound consequences on women and children. I think all of us are aware that women and girls' rights are facing unprecedented growing threats worldwide, from higher levels of discrimination, weaker legal protections, and less funding for programs and institutions that originally supported and protected women. The United Nations latest report, Women's Rights in Beijing, 30 years after, shows that in 2024, nearly a quarter of all governments worldwide reported a backlash on women's rights. And no more can this be seen than in the United States' potential federal funding freeze. This federal funding freeze will exacerbate women's vulnerability. This funding freeze, which disproportionately impacts social safety net programs, is only going to drive more female-headed families into financial distress. They are already in distress. And women who are breadwinners, they're going to bear the brunt of these cuts. It is a direct attack on women and children. The statistics are harrowing. Women disproportionately suffer during fiscal austerity. Women are 35% more likely than men to live in poverty. Moms who support millions of children in the United States, for every 66 cents they earn, a man earns $1. Women and children comprise 70% of America's poor. Women are more likely than men to live in poverty once they retire. And the female-headed households, 32% live in poverty. The United States has been, for the past decades, been a top leader in donations and investments in global health, providing some 40% of all donations, mostly through the United States Agency for International Development. You've probably heard about this organization, known by the acronym USAID, United States Aid. I'm going to be very honest. At the moment, there is widespread confusion across the government, across Congress, state programs, and nonprofit organization. It's been a rather dizzy odyssey, resulting in numerous nonstop media coverage, augmented protestations, and just 2 or 3 days ago, a federal judge has blocked the administration from taking any further steps to shut down U.S. aid. The administration plans to appeal this. This is an ongoing legal battle. This potential pause in U.S. foreign aid has had the UN in panic over the funding cuts. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned these severe cuts to humanitarian and development funding will have a devastating consequence for millions of vulnerable people worldwide. Tom Andrews, who is a human rights monitor, has bluntly said, "It's cruel, it's unnecessary, and it's ill-timed." In fact, he is appealing to the 47 members of the Human Rights Council to issue a declaration of conscience. I love that word, a declaration of conscience against this unfolding disaster, this humanitarian crisis. And for those people, those workers who are already on the ground, they have reported the impact has been devastating. I'm using the word devastating a lot because I can't find another word. Devastating is the word. The United Nations Population Fund said its programs across the world are affected because the United States provides 30% of the agency's administrative costs and 50% of its humanitarian aid funding. Workers have reported women are being turned away at clinics, clinics that provide maternity care, clinics that provide cancer treatment, clinics that provide HIV treatment. Doctors and nurses have been placed on leave or told, go home. Across the globe, agencies says decades of female-focused healthcare has been decimated. Just like this, overnight. About 2.5 million women and girls have been denied contraceptive care. It is important to underscore that for the past 4 years, the funding has helped to provide mental health care to women in Ukraine, displaced women in Chad, and maternal care for women in Afghanistan. So the impact is quite bad. But it's important to remember that the United States is not alone. These budget cuts are not only happening in the United States. There has been a wave of austerity and funding freeze that is affecting women in Europe. The data from Eurostat shows that more than half of Finnish women have experienced physical or sexual violence or threats. In 2023, 12,300 cases of intimate relationship or domestic violence were reported to the police. This is an increase of 5.3% from the previous year. Now, unless I'm living in the upside down, this is telling me violence is on the rise. And yet the government plans to cut 100 million from the social and healthcare sector, including vital funding from organizations that support survivors. And even the historically strong survivors, France, Germany, and the UK, they have pulled back. They have pulled back. In France, Macron initially championed a very ambitious aid agenda. However, under the weight of France's 3.2 trillion public deficit, this ambitious aid agenda was just quietly abandoned. So to ease this, the French Prime Minister put forward an austere budget with a proposed 1 billion public spending cut, including aid, by 2025, with this sparked an outcry across the political spectrum, shocked aid advocates. Oxfam France bluntly said, this is a move as a saving at the expense of the needs of the world's poorest. And these cuts are going to disproportionately affect Africa, a historic focus on French development efforts. Germany. Germany has historically been the second biggest donor after the United States. However, this year, so this is a particular year, the German government has unveiled plans to slash 4.8 billion from its developmental and humanitarian suffering. Shall I repeat those numbers? 4.8 billion. The Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, known by the acronym BMZ, is going to lose nearly 1 billion in 2025, whilst humanitarian aid is set to be more than halved. And yet 2 days ago, the German lawmakers voted for a huge increase in defense and infrastructure spending. Defense spending in Germany has already rose by 23% last year. And the UK, once a leader in global development, the UK has sharply cut its aid in the wake of a struggling post-Brexit economy and citing the economic fallout from COVID-19. According to the UK's Parliamentary International Development Committee, nearly 300,000 women died during pregnancy and childbirth globally in 2020. 70% of these deaths occurred in sub-Sahara Africa. A girl in South Sudan is more likely to die in childbirth than to finish secondary school. The official development assistant, this is a UK governmental agency that promotes and targets the economic development and welfare of developing countries. Evidence has shown that the ODA budget cuts have already had a disproportionate and negative impact on gender equality and women's rights. So when the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that these severe humanitarian cuts in development funding will have a devastating consequence, this was not a figure of speech. And the FGM impact. FGM's draconian consequences have been firmly established with surgical precision, and very frankly, it needs no further comment from me. The World Health Organization has stated there is no single practice which has such a dramatic negative effect on health in the broadest sense as FGM. And for those of us who have been fighting FGM, for those courageous survivors who are reliving this horrendous chapter in their life, we know FGM is not just a nick. I think most of us would agree that if someone came to your home, removed a 5-year-old child, took her to a special river, and proceeded to cut off her thumb, most of us would agree, well, this is criminal assault. This is kidnapping. This is aggravated assault. This is endangerment, threatening the life of a child. Most of us would be horrified. And yet this is precisely what is happening to little girls. Some of these girls are too young to even speak. Some of them are so young they just can't appreciate and understand the nature of the act. These girls who were held down, spread eagle, with knives and stones and blades. This is now magically called culture, tradition. The criminal legal system calls this criminal assault. When healthy skin is being amputated, it simply begs the imagination. There is no pain. Oh no, there is pain. Many of us have been to the dentist, and I don't know about you, but when I see that needle coming towards my mouth, there's always a moment of, oh my God, take a breath, take a breath. I know it's going to hurt, but eventually it does hurt, but it numbs it. Many of you, including myself, can't imagine going to the dentist and dealing with this pain. FGM is excruciating pain to the point that 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 UN special rapporteurs have bluntly said FGM is torture. And I am aware, painfully aware, there are pro-FGM advocates who've said the pain is not that bad. I beg to differ. There is nothing laudable about FGM. There's nothing beautiful about FGM, and there's nothing magnificent about FGM. Nothing, nothing, nothing. It has been reported that many African organizations were not prepared for the fact that they would be impacted by this freezing fund. They were blindsided. They just did not know. And yet, at the same time, this freezing fund is carrying on, it's carrying on, it's carrying on. What is needed, of course, is uninterrupted, sustained federal financial or funding aid to stop FGM. Now, what is also important to understand is that in many parts of the world, children are not eating. Okay, they're just simply not eating. And there have been, with some African organizations, amongst other things, they are providing school lunches. When 60% of American children qualify for federally funded programs to have lunch. For many of these children, this may be the only decent meal they will have out the day. When the Secretary General warned about these federal cuts, critics are also saying these programs that are affecting children and women, childcare, school lunches, disaster relief, programs such as Head Start, Meals on Wheel, and emergency food programs, leaving communities already in a dire fiscal strait, scrambling to adapt. Women who have been pillars of strength have now been asked to deal with this. Our babies are going to be hurt. Our babies who are tomorrow's moms, tomorrow's fathers, and tomorrow's voters. Kamala Harris once said, "We only see stars at night." We have to carry on speaking out against this suspension of funding and its impact on gender equality. Are we really going to allow thousands of little girls to be hurt as this? Surely shredded genitals and bleeding genitals cannot be a woman's destiny. Are we going to repeat the scenario of hunger as we saw in Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist, when Oliver Twist, desperate with hunger and reckless with misery, is emboldened to ask for another bowl of porridge? Are we really prepared to say no? There is only one answer why we must have federal funding, because it's 2025. And as countries slash their budget, as countries halt humanitarian aid and augment defense spending, there is only one question I can put forth. Who is really paying for these cuts? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Lorraine, that was brilliant. I hope all of our presenters will send me your presentations today.
Yes.
And this panel is being broadcast all over the world as part of the UN Commission on the Status of Women, Session 69. And I can tell you truly, having been at CSW, the concern, the anger of people at these cuts in far-right political systems, it's impacting the whole world. And it came on suddenly. Dr. Laurier Post of Northwestern University, who's actually in transit right now, but she has been an advocate against FGM and has done research on this subject. And she told me that at initial cut to their research was $25,000, and that wasn't the end. And it came immediately. And now UNICEF is being asked to submit their data on DEI, they are prepared for another cutback. So we're talking about women and girls' human rights. We're talking about civil society rights on the international level to survive, to not be mutilated or go through shocking illegal procedures in the name of culture or patriarchy. So I see that, Toby, you have a few comments, and also Dr. Camila Azadi is asking a question. So why don't you continue and tell us your thoughts, Toby?
Unmute. No, Lois, I simply was intrigued by a comment by a participant inviting us to join the FGM study group on LinkedIn. And I'm not sure that I am not already a member, but if I'm not, I would like to be. So, but I can't manage to direct message. MH is the participant who says that. But anyway, MH, I would like to join.
I would too.
Yeah.
Do we have Camille Abadi still with us? I know he raised his hand earlier, but
Yeah.
you have shown
Toddy
us.
is there. Toddy has joined. Wonderful. Wonderful.
I know that Camille was here earlier. Camille has done some very good research on the mutilation of little boys, the fact that what we call circumcision, and that this is another issue on just overall the mutilation of children. It's quite a very tragic, difficult read, but what we are doing to little girls is also being done to little boys almost methodically without another thought. I did see his hand here earlier. He may no longer be here. I don't know.
We will see. Sarah, do you see that Camille is still with us?
Let me see here. And in the meantime, we have Katie here.
Great, great.
Yeah.
Here he is.
Nothing like the voice of survivors to resonate the importance, the human cellular level of what happens with FGM. Katie, are you there?
Yeah, Kadi is there.
Kadi's here. Hello, Kadi.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
Fine. I think we
We're
can.
happy to see you.
Me too. I'm I'm trying to speak in English. Sorry if you don't understand all, but I'm trying.
You do very well.
I am Kadi Koita from Senegal, living in Europe now 50 years. Member of GAMS in France and GAMS Belgium, and co-founder of La Palabre in Senegal, where we have a shelter for women's violence victims, women and women who escape for FGM and early marriage. Toby and me, we create El Soleil and other FGM Euronet at that time in 1997. And we participate in many campaigns, and we do a lot of work in Europe, especially to have an action plan for 15 European countries. We done it. And I work on FGM like trainers and going to the family and to explain the damage of FGM in the body of woman and the mind. We work on FGM and make all the campaign all the resolution we was behind Euronet FGM and IEC, Inter-African Committee. All is, we are at that time, No Peace Without Justice, Emma Bonino organization who helped us to open the door on the European Parliament and the UN. Our last campaign was ban FGM worldwide. And you know all the resolution about that. And all the African countries was adopted, and all the members at that time of our organization and other organization coming to celebrate that convention and that resolution. But we work with also UNICEF sometime, UNFPA for many campaigns. But I'm afraid because we said 2030 FGM will be eradicated in the world. I am not negative, but just realist. I think 2030 is tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is tomorrow. And what I am seeing now in the world is really, we've done many, many things. All the organization who work on FGM done many work, hard and strong work. But some way, I think after the COVID, many places they continue to do it, and many places they do it for on the babies, 7 days babies to 3-month babies. And the mother, they think when they do it, that babies doesn't remember for that, don't remember at the future. And they said they don't have a pen like when they are adult. I think for me, our problem also is on GEM is the political level. The political level, all the leaders in the world, the religious level, they are not taking it seriously, the FGM subject. We are now do many work. How many money they spend to eradicate FGM? How many money? But they continue to do it. Last 2 months, I heard, for example, in my country, in Senegal, I wrote on the newspaper, 11 girls was mutilated. Where is the African leads who signed the Maputo Protocol, who signed all the convention, all the resolution? Where is that people? How? Why they cannot applicate the law in our countries, everywhere in the world? I think they must do, I don't know if it's more campaign, but they must do education to women and men together. Without education, we cannot move away. I think really, and also many small organizations who work with the grassroots level cannot continue to work because the financer is really small, and many document to ask from them. And to do, always they said 3 years project, 2 years project, 1 year project. When you start to work with the local population, the grassroots level, it must be the long way work. And it must be to give enough finance that woman there or men to really work closely to the religious leader, the political leader, and all the leaders there to train, to educate the woman's leader in every villages, 2 or 3, to get good result. But if they don't do that to change the mentality and to change the behavior, many things will be stay here. We can come back here on maybe 50 or 80 years. FGM continue. FGM is the violation of women's right. FGM is the violation of girls' right. Why they cut the babies for traditional, for social norm. I think we must educate the people to make that negative social norm behind us. We must be work with people who can explain to the villages how damage FGM do in the body of the woman and their mind. For me, clitoris is an organ. Cutting an organ is criminalized. But we continue to say, no, it's our culture, it's our traditional, we must continue to do that. And I think also the religious leader have a work to do by themselves because they live there, they live with the population, and sometimes they don't say the real things about the religion. They said it's the religion. But when we ask all the religious people, they said, no, it's not, isn't. I think to abandon FGM is education, but change the comportment, change the mentality, and work on the respect of the woman. Like woman is human and not only to use the woman by the sex and give a birth. In many countries now, the violence against women are so high and it's everywhere. It's not in the poor country or it's all the social level. Violence against women is terrible now. Some of them you don't heard it, but when you talk on some people, it's very high. And the problem is in Africa, for example, in many other countries, if you talk to about FGM, you don't give them food, education, and health care. How you think they will thinking about FGM before having something to have a good life? If you come to someone who thinking, what I'm going to eat today, how can I get eating to give to my children? You think that people will say to you, okay, we can talk about FGM? No, FGM is linking about all. If we don't make amelioration on the life condition, we can always talk about violence against women, FGM, early marriage will be not finished. Our girl, 12 years girl, 8-year girl, how we can give that girl to the men who have sometime 50 years or 40 years. We know that is why we talked about things. I think also in some countries they say, yeah, we can make it in the hospital. It's minder pen. It's good to the the political level have enough engagement, enough strong to say no. But many people on the politic, they just talked to us activists, but behind us, they just thinking her chair to sit to make the politic and make money. The political level is very important. We cannot do nothing without the political level and the religious level. Because the religion is very important in Africa and everywhere, I think now. And we must train that people, give them education, give them explanation to the body, to how is the body and the mentality also, to work psychological with them. Because many women now, they have psychological problem. And we cannot say what we want. It's the result of the mutilate what they done when they are young. Work on the law is also prevention. The law is prevention before is sanction. And I think we must use it. But we can do everything. Write many books, make many films, but we must go behind to the grassroots level and work with them to see some result. For the moment, it's not the way. Many organizations are on the grassroots level to work. I don't criticize the other organization, but for me, we get the law, we get the convention, we get the resolution. Now, let's give the money to the people who work on the grassroots level. It's very difficult. It's very difficult in the grassroots level to work. Give them chance to work on education and change the mentality. Give them the opportunity to can just be woman, just be human rights. They need to be respected and give them the level, because you have some women, they never go to school, but they are more strong and they are more clever than many men around her. But because she's a woman, she cannot take the lead. She cannot do some things because she's a woman. It's work because in many countries, when you are a woman, you cannot do many things. It's also to work on the social norm. The social pressure is on the woman's les épaules.
Shoulders.
It's very difficult. Just to finish, I think today, for example, in the CSW, I heard many data, but it's a sad and pity for us to say 200,000 million and 2025 we say 230,000 million girls was mutilated.
Mhm.
And it's also difficult to make data because some area, anybody is there to control, to know what they do. I think we can hope 2030, maybe it will be start to eradicate all the violence against women and to respect the woman, to respect the girl's rights. And one day maybe we can say human rights, not woman's right, not girl right, but human rights.
Mhm.
Thank you for give me this opportunity. I hope next time I can, for my English, I can say what I have in my heart.
Mhm.
Because I think the people who caution the girls' mutilation are the criminal people. The
Mhm.
girl must be protected because the girl are the future. And the boy also, to train the boy to go to school and to educate the boy is very important because world is boy and girls, woman and man. If you don't work together, anything will be happening on the future.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank
Katie,
you.
the voice of survivors really resonates the reality of FGM. And we know that in the small villages, indeed, this is an intergenerational issue. And it's an intersectional issue on human rights. We could do a panel or a program on FGM, not necessarily at the UN or at the EU. We can do it anytime. If we come together, we could set it up and speak out because those voices are part of the force of social change. I believe we have Katie or Camille. Yes, Sarah?
Yes. Okay, Camille, I'm going to allow you to talk here. So here we go. Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello everyone. I don't see myself. Can you see me?
No, but I can
We
hear.
can hear
I
you
can't
now.
hear you.
Mhm.
Okay. How do I make myself appear?
Go to video and let it work. Look at video at the bottom.
Join as a panelist. Okay.
It says mute video participants. Yeah. Try video.
Okay. So I think I'm still not.
Okay, here, I just asked you to start your video.
Host is asked to start a video. Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Here I
Hello.
am.
Yes.
Okay, with my fishy pajamas. Sorry, it's late here. How are you, everyone?
We're
Fine.
fine.
Good.
Good to
All the
see you.
anchors are here. All the masters are here. Well, Lou, well. Well, first of all, everyone, I'm glad to be here. It is the first year of the new year, the Kurdish or Iranian so-called the new year is the first day of spring.
Ah.
Even though it's not like home and you don't feel it so much, but yeah, it is the Nowruz. It's called the new day, the first day of the year, which is the first day of spring today. All right. So I've been hearing from you guys, and as usual, I'm flattered, and thank you, Hillary, and Toby, and Caddy, and Lorraine, and everyone is here. So I'm glad to be here also. I don't really have particularly any questions to ask. I have one or two quick comments and a suggestion as always. It's well, we have worked on the issue of female mutilation, genital mutilation, let's call it. Now, leave aside the differences that some of we do have on mutilation or cutting or both, or mutilation or cutting for female or male. To my knowledge, and that takes me back many years, sort of like when I started working on FGM in Iran. I was kind of clueless about the issue of MGM or male circumcision or male mutilation or cutting. Depends really, again, how you call it up. As a man I come from a Kurdish culture. With my parents being Muslim, of course, I was cut in the age of 5 or 6. I clearly remember what has happened to me, which wasn't pleasant. And that's one of the reasons when I worked on the women mutilation, I always felt and understood the interviewees, how when they were talking about their pain, or they were cut in the same age as I was cut as a boy. So many years on, when I finished and concluded my work on female cutting, I turned into researching male cutting. So Toby is one of the ones that have seen my work on both female and male mutilation. Lorraine and Hillary and I guess if most of you guys have one way or another edited or worked or kind of cooperated with what I have done. So it doesn't need me to basically tell you all about it. What I can really suggest, friends, some of us have worked quite a long time on the issue of FGM, and between us, it is something that we all know that FGM luckily is in a decline for many reasons, which is really a good news. I know we have to keep it up. I know we have to warm it up, and of course, I understand all the funding strategies and political and the tactical part of the issue. But the matter of the fact is, FGM is declining, which is a good news, but still it exists, which is a bad news. Now, I've been talking about this wherever this I've been invited, or I talk about this and I write about this in my work. I say, what if we try and join our efforts, the researchers, what I mean, the campaigners, the media people, whoever who actually have worked on FGM, and nowadays they try to change a heart because there is no really much funding. The international arena doesn't pay so much attention. We have Trump and this new development, as Lorraine is saying. What if that we join our efforts and link in the two issue of a very important issue of MGM and FGM, and then hands in hands we start addressing the both issues together. This way, we're going to carry on working on FGM, keep it alive, and at the same time, we give much legitimacy to the declining the rate of FGM by basically discussing the very issue that's not really talked about or covered or pay any attention, unlovable issue of the male circumcision. We all know that's part of the Christian world, most majority of the Muslim, and Toby very well know the Jewish community do practice female circumcision, let alone other communities elsewhere in the world, including Africa. The issue is medicalized. There is a huge multi-million industry behind it. All the sort of like beautiful luxury clinics, also there's a huge, enormous turnover financially. And of course, all the medical mafia is trying to prevent any sort of information, as we dealt with the same issues on FGM in the early days, if some of us do remember. So the issue of FGM, it's still virgin pretty much. Not many know so much about what's actually happening in terms of like the hazards, the dangers, and the outcome of that, which directly basically poses the same issue, the same danger, the same concern as for a little girl to a little boy. And of course, it does threaten the healthy sexual life of between men and women, and particularly for men. And then, of course, one way or another will have an effect for women's sexual experience. So, my suggestion nowadays is really based on, let's join up together, guys, for strategical reasons, for a tactical reason, and of course for a human reason. And and there are many ways that we can basically program this. We can plan it ahead. We can I don't know, do the same thing, because we do have a good experience of how we address the FGM, how we gained international sport, and basically we know the game in a way. So if you do, what if that we basically kind of open up a little bit, uh, leave alone all this sort of like gender-based divisions that's somehow even though this we don't even realize, but it does some ways do prevent us to go a step further. So yeah, basically that is my suggestion, and that is my a point that I would wanted to make, since I have worked in both the fields, and I can see the potential really for the male circumcision or male mutilation to come about, as Lorraine and Hillary and you, Toby, you very well know the potential lays there, and then we don't really take the full advantage of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Camille. This was very enlightening to expand our awareness of FGM. I note that when there has been an effort to have the male take the responsibility for birth control, that this has not been very successful. And always the woman has to carry the responsibility. We have in our One Run files a picture of a little girl, probably less than 6 months old, and the terror in her expression during FGM. These girls are not old enough to know what's happening to them. And when it's spoken of as a prelude to marriage or marriageability, we're seeing more action against child marriage. Well, let's also link FGM to that. Do any of our speakers have closing comments you would like to make?
Yeah,
I'm
could
fine,
I
thank you.
just add a little bit? I mean, I think there's been a lot of synergy in what people have been talking about, all kinds of coincidence of important points, and we don't do it often enough because we can't. There's just not the capacity. So every time we do it, thank you, Lois and Sarah and everybody else for putting these things together, because it's really important. I do feel now that we know that FGM is bad. I agree, and Camille knows perfectly well that I agree totally that MGM is equally bad. And I had a fascinating discussion, actually, I've got to say, once in a London restaurant with Camille and Tony Mariba and my own husband, all of whom were cut as small boys, on that subject in a place that I never thought we would be discussing such matters. And it was really valuable. And the point then was, they said, we can't deal with MGM yet, because if we do, we won't be heard about. FGM, we have moved from that situation. I think Camille knows what I'm talking about here. And we now can talk about it more. And we are not going to get rid of any of this stuff until we say just hurting children is not on. Never mind what sort of hurting the children it is, whether it's witchcraft or some horrible traditional practice or psychological torture or whatever it is, while we hurt children, we are still allowing this to happen. And there has to be a very, very firm rule in our heads and in society as a whole that hurting children mustn't happen. And it's going to take a long time. And I doubt that it will happen while I'm still active, or probably while any of us is still active, that we completely get rid of that if we ever do. But we have to keep shouting about it. And that is why I was so keen to go back to fundamentals about the context in which these things happen, because in a way we are persuaded to focus. When I say only on the specifics, I don't mean at all, as you know, that the specifics are not critical, because they are. But we're allowing a lot of people to get away with a lot of leeway by letting them off doing anything about it at all. You don't have to be an expert on FGM or MGM or witchcraft or any of the other cruel and horrible things that happen to children in order to stop it. What you have to be is determined that you will make the rules right, that you will make the law work, that you will make sure that schools protect children, that parents understand it may not happen. And so we're going to have to compartmentalize our attacks, if you want to call them that, or approaches, so that some of us deal in some parts of this extraordinarily wide circumstance and others deal in other parts. And for instance, people like Cardi obviously are going to talk about what it is to be a survivor, and that is absolutely as she should. Others of us are going to talk about the law, some of us are going to talk about social context, etc., etc., etc. And we're only going to get that to work when, as I've talked to Toby, I think more than other colleagues about this, when we have FGM studies that allows us to be quite specific about looking at different parts of the field. And in case anybody doubts whether that is a good idea, just think, we don't have something called cancer studies. We have oncologies that address very specific parts of the oncology spectrum, if you like. And we have to be that specialized in order to be able to address the real issues that come up. So I don't apologize for looking at wider issues, nor would you want me to. But there again, I don't expect either anybody who's looking at very specific issues to apologize for that. We have to understand it's all part of what we need to do. And somehow we've got to start being bright enough to work out how to bring it all together. Is that okay, Lewis?
Oh, it's very helpful. I want to thank you, Hillary. Sometimes we have to change our strategy because of what's going on around us. And an example of that is there was a group that's still active called Every Woman Treaty. And they wished originally to have a new convention on violence against women, because the CEDAW Convention of the UN does not specifically in its core content mention violence against women. Well, now the strategy has changed a bit with high level encouragement and engagement to instead look at an optional protocol. And that indeed would have to be ratified by states, but it still is an open entry point for advocacy on violence against women. And the UN, meaning UN Women, has done a lot of publicizing International Women's Day and definitely CSW. And by our collaborating where possible with effective partners is significant. Today, Ambassador Anwar al-Chowdhury spoke before a women's leadership seminar during CSW, and he mentioned FGM. Well, he can be one of our advocates too, because he for women's rights and was chair of the UN Security Council at the time of the passage of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. Does anyone else have anything to say?
Thank you, Lois, for
Thank you very much, Lois.
that.
Thank you, everyone
Thank
on the
you,
panel.
Sarah,
Yeah.
for
And Sarah, thank you for your
moderating
patience.
us. Is Sarah still there?
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
she's there.
here.
Yes.
Mhm.
Hi. Good.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
reviewing.
patience, Sarah. And thank you, everyone. Your insights were quite remarkable. We just have to soldier on.
Mhm.
We just have to carry on.
Yeah.
That's
And
what we
Camille,
have
I
to
will
do.
be thinking about your suggestion.
You do, and you did not print my book. You owe me that.
Yeah.
And
Print it
Lorraine.
yourself on a website like I did, Camille.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
put it on a website.
and Lorraine, I really have to give you this. You're really good at making speeches. I wonder if you become a president woman someday down the line.
Very good.
Believe it or not, at one time I
Oh,
wanted to be an actress.
You
well,
are
that
doing very
shows.
good
Yeah, I
with
wanted
words.
to
You
be
are
an
very good.
actress with the drama. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sarah, are we still being recorded?
We are, so we can go ahead. If everybody wants to look right at their cameras, I would like to take a screenshot, please.
Oh
So
dear.
1, 2, 3, and smile, please.
With my pajama, the fishy pajamas.
Yes, I have it in your fishy pajamas. Wonderful. Thank you. And so if there are no other comments, I can go ahead and close the webinar, and anybody who'd like to stay and chat as a panelist can certainly do so. So are we free to close?
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Lois,
feel that
before
it's
we go,
Bye.
Lois,
Thank you.
goodbye.
Bye-bye. Just to say,
Bye.
keep to
Goodbye,
work
Candy.
together. Working together is better.
Yes.
Work together
Indeed.
is
Yeah.
better.